Hey, what's up everyone? It's Emily and welcome back to my channel. After days of reading, countless hours poured over this book, and hours spent on the Reddit page, I feel like I'm finally ready to talk about House of Leaves. This beautiful cult classic book. What a monster this is, quite literally. So I wanted to talk about this book because it ruined my life for about 48 hours, and I am finally ready to talk about it. And I want to, instead of giving a review for this book, which I gave 5 stars to, by the way, instead of doing a review, I want to give people a guide on how to read it, including how I read this book and the mistakes that I made reading this book. And by the way, I am not like a pretentious person when it comes to this book. I'm a newer fan to it, I suppose, but like this is not going to be a place to like hate on people for how they choose to read this book, because it is hard and it is its own thing. If you are able to finish this book in any capacity, hats off to you. And there is no right or wrong way to read this book. Let me just put that out there now. Use any resources you need to understand what's happening and just enjoy the book. Reading is supposed to be enjoying, but this book is definitely not a book of leisure, and I will get into what that means later. I'm going to try and keep this as comprehensive and linear as possible, but it's a little bit hard. Also, just before we get started, if you are someone who really likes to go into books not knowing anything at all and you are really up to the challenge, I recommend not even watching this video. Don't watch any videos on this book. Don't do anything related to it, and just kind of let yourself be carried away with the text. However, I am not like that. I knew I wanted to read this a certain way, and I wanted to understand the book on the first time reading it. And so I watched a lot of guide videos and I read a lot of reviews and everything. Although I will say, no matter what, don't go on Reddit, because that's just not the place to go for your first time reading it. And I'm really glad that I stayed away, because they do a lot of explaining in it, more than I would say is recommended for trying to read it for the first time. I think it will ruin the experience. So if you're someone who needs a little bit of help, welcome. I'm gonna try and help you navigate this book for the first time. Or if you're not interested in reading this book, maybe this will make you become more interested in it and make you take the leap. Otherwise, just stay away if you want to go into this with absolutely no understanding and you want to just experience it for the first time by yourself. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, welcome. I'm going to try and break this down and give you the best comprehensive guide to reading this book that I can. If you're someone who doesn't care about triggers and you think that they spoil a book, go ahead and skip to this time down below and you will skip that. First of all, there are going to be a lot of triggers in this book. It is kind of seen as a horror novel, though the author himself is kind of like, I didn't really see it like that at first. There are some pretty graphic elements to this that I think people need to be aware of before going into it. I was not made aware of a lot of these, and I will say it was pretty triggering for me to read about. There's some crazy stuff. Definitely look it up for yourself, but I'm going to go over the big ones here. Blood, gore, death, murder, darkness, like eternal darkness, and like a void. Guns, rape, drug and alcohol use, and animal cruelty / abuse. All right, so a brief overview of this book. This is the book. It's House of Leaves. It's very heavy. It's heavier than it looks. I swear it's like 2 or 3 pounds, which is just insane. You wouldn't think it would weigh that much. But anyway, this is House of Leaves. I have the full remastered full cover edition of the book, which means that every time that the word house is mentioned in this book, it is the color blue. And anytime there are like passages that are like struck out or mention the Minotaur, those are in red. So that's just kind of what it means. It's like a fun little thing that just emphasizes these important words. It's written by Mark Z. Danielewski. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And it was published in the year 2000, and it took him 10 years to write. On the most surface level of this book, it is about a family moving into a house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. But that is like, honestly, I wouldn't even say that's scratching the surface of what this book is. That is just like the most basic foundation that you're going to find on the cover of this book when people are talking about it, because they don't want to give anything away, quite plainly. It is also one of the best examples I can give of ergodic literature, which means that it is hard to read on purpose. You really have to kind of snake your way through the text to really understand what's going on, and it is just hard to read. It is not like normal books. I'm not like other books. I'm ergodic. Sorry. But like the footnotes in this book have footnotes for themselves. Like that's how convoluted this text can be. And it is complicated and it is hard to navigate at times. So this is not something that I would recommend reading if you're just looking for a read that you don't really have to think about while you're reading it. Like this will take all of your brain power to get through because the text is dense and it is hard to navigate. It's also been coined as satirical academic criticism, which I really love that way of viewing this book. I think, in my opinion, that's one of the best ways to view this book. A lot of people coin it as a horror novel. I really didn't see it as that. I think the satirical element is really important to this book. And on top of that, the pages are written very unconventionally. The text on the pages scrawl in very different ways. You go from very dense text-heavy pages to pages that have 3 words on them or even 1 word on them or no words on them. It is definitely its own kind of beast, and you really have to work hard to navigate it. So let's talk about the setup of this book. So this is going to go into, very briefly, the 3 kind of layers this book has going on. It's not going to have huge spoilers for the book or anything, but in order to talk about it, you kind of have to get what's going on. So our first layer, our tippity top layer here, is this old man, and you learn about this in the introduction, but there's an old man named Zampano, and he has died, and our other main character, Johnny Truant, finds his collection of papers of this academic criticism of a home footage movie called The Navidson Record, and it is his life's work from what we kind of are getting from it. And Johnny decides to take these pages from Zampano's life and turn it into a book. He's going to finish what this old man started. In Zampano's writings is kind of the explanation of the found footage as well as his critique on it and his analysis on Will Navidson and his life. I think this is pretty much as close to a found footage book we will ever have in terms of like tropes or like horror elements. You know, like you have movies like The Blair Witch Project where it's this found footage and that's kind of what makes it scary. This is about as close to that as I think that I've ever been in a book format that is able to like really get under your skin in the same way. But anyway, in this record, we learn that Will Navidson and his family moved to Virginia into this house, and when they come back from a trip from Seattle, they realize that the house is larger on the inside than it is on the outside. And from there, it kind of just takes off, and we go down this whole journey of him navigating through this house, and you find out some crazy stuff. Johnny is he's an interesting character. He is kind of commenting on it as the book progresses while also telling stories of his life. And in a way, it kind of parallels the story, but in a lot of ways, it's also just its own thing. While I was reading it, I didn't really understand how the 2 stories mimicked each other at first or why he was telling us some of the things he was telling us. I was very confused. Johnny's part is, in my opinion, my least favorite part about the whole book, but it is really important to the story. I kind of just want to leave it there. It's Johnny's story of him finding these papers and then putting it together, commenting on what Zampano wrote, and then also putting in his own anecdotes of his life. It's kind of very convoluted, it's very within itself, and it's really hard to explain, but that's kind of the best I can do. And at the same time, we learn from Johnny's writing that he is changing what Zampano wrote without telling us. And so his whole thing is just very much its own thing. Yeah. And then on top of that, we also have an editor who is editing Johnny's notes. So there is a lot of use of foreign language in this book. There's a lot of Latin, German, and French, as well as I think some other Italian. There might be some other languages involved. And when Johnny doesn't know the translation to something, the editor tells us the translation to it. So luckily I did not actually have to do a lot of internet sleuthing that I thought I would have to do when I read this book, but they did give us the text meaning. But that's pretty much it. But the editor also tells us to go to certain parts of the book to further understand certain things happening, which was really, really cool. It also corrects any mistakes that Johnny makes in terms of referencing things or trying to like understand what Zampano is doing. The editor kind of goes back and clears any of that up. So one important thing to note about this whole thing is that all the narrators are unreliable. Like, we don't know if any of them are telling the truth. We don't know. And we will never know. Because we know that Johnny is changing stuff that Zampano wrote, and we know that Zampano might be making up everything because there are no records of this Navidson record that he's talking about. Johnny's like, I don't even know what this guy's talking about. Is this even real? If it's real, then like, why have I not heard of it? It's written in a way that makes you think, well, of course they're speaking the truth because this is an academic research paper and like he's referencing so many books and so many things. Like, how is this not true? We don't know. We don't know. And you just kind of have to be okay with not knowing. And it also means that when the characters are telling you something as the reader reading this work, you have to know that that might be false at any time. And that you just have to be okay with that. But what it does is, as the reader, it gives us a ton of wiggle room to interpret this text in our own way. We are yet another person analyzing this text. We can put ourselves in the shoes of Johnny or someone else experiencing these words and this work and figuring it out for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, they don't know what's happening as much as we don't know what's happening. They just happen to have more references available, but now holding this in our hands, we have the same references as they do. I think that kind of adds another layer to the book, and it makes you an active party in the understanding of the text, which is something that not a lot of books have done. And on top of all of that, this book is said so often as a horror book. People kind of put it out into the world as like, this book is you're not gonna be able to sleep for weeks if you read this book. It was so scary. But at the heart of it all, it's really a love story. And it's very beautiful, actually. And I can tell you right now, don't let that scare you away from reading it. Don't let people saying it's so scary that they haven't slept in weeks. Don't let that scare you out of reading it. I can tell you, I was so absorbed in this book for like 2 or 3 days. It was all I was thinking about, but there was never a second that I like couldn't sleep or that I was afraid to be alone or something like that. It's not that kind of book. But all 3 of these layers play off of each other, and so you really need to pay attention to kind of the order of everything that's going on, and that includes the footnotes. In fact, half of the story is in the footnotes, which I know is crazy and sounds really boring and weird and hard to read, and it is, but it honestly is so worth it. I'm gonna do like a little side note here. Like, if I haven't made it clear already, like, this book is hard to read. Like, it took a lot of brain power to read this book. This is not your cozy autumn read you're gonna drink your hot chocolate to in front of the TV or something like that. This is like, I look like that guy in front of the board of the conspiracy theory board. Like, that was me for like 6 hours reading this book. I was like with a pencil in hand, just like writing stuff down, like, oh, this has to be important, and like, what does this mean? And it's just like, the book isn't happening to you. You have to be an active participant in reading this book. I mean, there's a whole section of footnotes where Zampano is listing off like random photographers' names, and every single name is a palindrome of itself. I mean, and like, what did that have to do with the story? I have no idea. It was just pages of that though. And it was like, okay, I guess this is all right. You just have to learn to roll with it. And on top of that, this book is frustrating because you're going to come out of this book with more questions than you have answers, because it's not going to answer any of the questions you're probably going to have. And for a lot of people, that's going to leave this book really unsatisfying to them. And I think that's why a lot of people go back to this book a lot, because they want to find more answers. And honestly, there just aren't a lot of answers in this book, and you're not going to find them. You have to kind of just be okay with that, or kind of think up the answers for yourself and just be like, yep, and that's what I think. Like, the book isn't going to make sense of all the nonsense. You have to give meaning to the nonsense and the questions that aren't answered. Just another side note, there are no mistakes in this book. Mark himself has like come out in interviews and he's like, if you think that was a mistake, it wasn't. So just like, I think that was one of the really fun parts about it, is that there will be typos or random things missing, and I would circle it and I'd be like, this has to mean something, right? And it totally does. I don't know what it means, but it meant something because Mark told me it meant something. So I thought I had so much fun reading this book, but oh my gosh, it was infuriating. Just be aware that you're going to be frustrated, and just you have to go into it knowing that. Okay, so there are a couple ways that you can read this book, and I am a believer that you can read this book any way you want. And I know I'm not alone, because people on Reddit have said the same thing because of the way that this book is written and that it is so hard to understand. I am a firm believer that reading is for enjoyment, and if you really want to read this book and it's just really hard for you to read, I think you can still read it. You just may need to read it differently. So the first way that you can read it, this is how I read it, is that you can just read it fully in the way that it was intended to be. So you will read the story. When it tells you to go to a footnote, you go to that footnote, you read the whole footnote, and then you go back to the story, and on and on and on. So you're reading the Navidson record and Johnny's commentary on it, plus the editorial notes as it comes. I think this is what people would consider the correct way to read it. It makes the most sense in terms of the way that the book is formatted. And then on top of that, whenever the editor introduces something in the index, you would then leave the chapter that you're on, go to the index, and go read or view whatever they're telling you to read in the index. All I can say is when the editor says to go to the index, go to the index. I think it really enhances everything about this book to like go back there and like look at the pictures or the little hints that they have back there, and then going back to the story with a bit more well-rounded knowledge of what's happening. The second way I would say that you could read this, if that is a little bit daunting for you, is to read the Navidson record all by itself. Just read Zampano's notes, go to the footnotes when it needs to be translated or they're kind of clarifying something happening. But the Navidson record, Zampano's story, makes sense by itself. You don't have to read the footnotes. It is a story in and of itself. And in my opinion, it's the most enjoyable part of the book. And then after that, if you wanted to go back and read all of Johnny's stuff, I suppose you could. I would definitely recommend doing that because I feel like you're missing half the story if you don't. It's a very different reading experience, I would say, and you're kind of missing out on the whole struggle of reading the book while getting through it. People will probably get mad at you if you read it this way. The thing is, again, I just think people should enjoy books, and if that's the only way that you can get through the book, I think that that's okay. I'm not like a pretentious reader or whatever. Also, Johnny's sections are definitely the most triggering sections, so like if that is also something that like you need to stay away from, like I totally understand that and I wouldn't blame you. At the end of the day, it's just a book and like we all just want to enjoy reading, right? So just do what you need to do. My number one tip for this book is to take your time. That's it. Take your time with this book. I zoomed through it and I kind of regret it, but also I could not physically put it down. But the book is going to inform you when you need to speed up and when you need to slow down. So I would say just listen to the book, listen to the way that it is informing you how to read certain sections. And some of them, it is going to feel like you are walking through the mud and you're going to be like, this is so pointless, and you're going to skim it and whatever. I know I skimmed it. I'll be the first one to say it. I skimmed a lot of Johnny's stuff and I kind of regret it, but also I don't. I do think that the way the book is written though is informing you how to feel. And I think that in that turn also brings forward the essence of the scariness of it, I suppose. So just kind of like let the words seep under your skin and like really like let the book guide you with how to read it. My second tip is to go to the index. If the editor tells you there's something in the index, go to the index. There is so much hidden back there and it is so fun, and like, but don't go to the index before it tells you to. It enhances the story. You learn so much. And honestly, that was one of my favorite parts, was like leaving the book and being like, oh crap, okay, like let me go back here, and then being like, oh my God, I cannot believe it. It's just me. Also, I keep saying index. I think I mean appendixes. I'm so sorry. Not the index, the appendix. The index is its own thing. Also, like fun fact, there are words in the index that it tells you it's on like 3 or 4 different pages. Like the word fountain, it says that it's in the book 4 or 5 times. It's not even in the book like 1 time. So they lied to you, okay? They're lying to you. My third tip is to look at the sources they mention. Zampano and Johnny are both going to mention lots of different books, stories. There's a biblical story that they reference, and there's also a Greek myth that they reference, and they're pretty important elements to the book and the characters, and it's definitely something that I would familiarize yourself with. They're going to talk about it a little bit in the book, but if you really want to have like a full understanding, definitely anytime they mention something, just look it up, see what it's about, because it's going to inform you more about why that was so important in the story. I don't think it'll change the meaning of the book for you that much, but I do think it adds that extra layer as the reader, an overall like feeling of like, I don't know, I felt like a crazy scientist reading this book, and I feel like just like scouring the internet looking for answers, like that just made it so much better. My fourth tip is going to be to engage with the text. If you are an annotator, this is for you. Write shit down. Mark pages that seem important to you. Anytime they reference something that keeps coming up and up and up again, mark it down. Go and like take your pen, highlight words that you think are important. Like this would be such the perfect book to do that for, because you are going to find things in this that other people will not. And like, there are hidden things in the text that the author wants you to find, but he will never mention it. And like the book will never mention it. And so it's just there for the people who are going to be insane enough to do that. And for me, that is so fun. And when I reread this, I will probably be doing that because it was just so fun to engage with the text in that way. Number 5 is going to be go into this with an open mind. This book is frustrating. You're going to want to throw it against the wall. I promise you, it's going to happen at least one time. You're going to get bored. You are going to get bored and you're going to be like, I hate this. But don't. Everything's in there for a reason. Everything is like, everything plays out. And like, even if we don't understand why it's in there, there's a reason it's in there. Number 6 is nothing is as it seems in this book. There are no mistakes. So when you see a mistake in the book, it's there for a reason, even if we don't understand why. Again, all the narrators are unreliable, and we can't really take anything in this book at face value. You really just don't know what's going on. And so like, it's kind of up to you to determine like what is truthful and what is not. And number 7 is after you finish reading this book, go to Reddit. Just go to the Reddit page, go to the House of Leaves Reddit. Oh my gosh, I found so much interesting and good stuff in there that people pointed out that I had never even thought of, or things that they had found that I just would not have the time to figure out, like the whole fountain and the index thing, along with some really amazing discussions. I'm gonna put the link of one down below that was actually just from today that blew my mind, and I thought it was such a great discussion. And it really, the Reddit page really helped me understand this book in ways that like I did not while I was reading it. And it really opened my eyes to just how deep this book really goes. Like, it's incredible. But at the end of it all, like it is up to your interpretation. And I think going into it with an open mind is going to be the best way to go about it. There is no right answer. Like there is no right answer to this book. It's all just up to the reader and like how they interpret and engage with the text. Okay, those are all my tips and tricks. That's all I have for you. Don't want to say any more because I think anything beyond what I have already told you is going to take away from the reading experience. I have bestowed on you any knowledge that I can at this time. Let me just say, if you're worried about reading this book because people keep saying that it is super scary, don't listen to them. I did not think it was scary at all. I mean, maybe that's just me. I guess it depends on what your fears are. If you're scared of the unknown or dark, endless hallways, maybe this is not one for you. But for me, that didn't really bother me at all. So there were moments where I felt like a little bit of anxiety reading it, like maybe someone was watching me. But this isn't like a classic horror book. This isn't something that kept me up at night. If anything, it just kept my head moving with questions. I had so many questions all the time about everything. I would say that is the part that like really gets in your head and like under your skin, is like you have so many things left unanswered. But don't let the idea of it being a horror book like turn you away from it if this is something that sounds really interesting to you. All right, well, that is all I can really give you at this time without giving away too much of the story. So I hope that this helps you understand this book a little bit more if you're planning on going into it. If you are not interested in reading this book, I hope this at least kind of piqued your interest as to like what the heck is even this book. And the answer is, I don't even know. If anyone is interested in more discussions about this book, I would totally do one that has spoilers, but I don't really know where the line is with that because I feel like people are so secretive about this book. Like they don't want spoilers on the internet because literally ruins everything. I don't know. But that is House of Leaves, and I 100% recommend this book if you are looking for a reading process that is like no other, especially if you hate yourself. I'm just kidding. I thought it was so fun. When I read this, it was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I honestly could not get it out of my head because I just needed to know what happened next. I have never read a book done in this way before. I don't know if there are any other books exactly like this out there. If there are, I would love to read them. So like, give me them recs down below if you've got it. Let me know down below if you've read this book or if you're looking at reading this book. I'd love to hear what everyone has to say about it because it's definitely now up there in like one of the best books I've ever read. Not even necessarily content-wise, but just the way that it like came into my life and kind of took over my life, and I'm still thinking about it even weeks later. I don't know. I'm not a rereader very often, but I'm almost considering rereading this book already because I'm just like, there's gotta be so much that I missed. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this helps you out if you're looking at reading this book. If you enjoyed this video, if you would like the video and subscribe to my channel, it would mean so much to me. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.